This happened a while back, but it still paints a clear image in my head. I live in a very small town where we all know each other, and we usually get along just fine. We are only a speck on our tiny state, outcasts really, not noticed by anyone. I, on the other hand, love this small town. The people are great and so giving, so caring. Well, that's what I thought, until I saw for myself how dangerous this town really is, especially for a 15-year-old girl. It was a very hot day, that kind of day where the air alone can choke you out, let alone doing something remotely active. I thought otherwise and planned a sleepover with my best friend, who was over at my house. We packed up our stuff and left to go to her house. It was so hot, and I was actually scared of the walk ahead. We were just about to leave until we heard the sweet music of the ice cream truck. Smiling, I turned to my friend and said we can get a free ice cream since the people who own it are friends with my family. As the hunk of white metal turned into our small neighborhood, all the neighborhood children surrounded it, like seagulls for French fries on the beach, the soft metallic chimes of dimes and quarters in their hands. I waited for the eager children in front of me to get their ice cream first, then they walked away. I soon glanced at the panel and asked my friend what she wants, and both of us made our choices. I looked up at the man, about to say his name, before I stopped and realized that he was a complete stranger. I looked at him with my mouth open in shock, and I soon asked where the man and his son was. He simply replied, "They left to go on vacation and left me in charge. So what do you want, pretty lady?" he said with a very creepy smile. I didn't really want to say anything to him, but I didn't want to seem impolite. The man seemed to be in his 30s, very tan, and had gone a few days without shaving. He wore a white, stained tank top, and I couldn't see his pants at all. I just mumbled, "Oh, I just wanted to say hi," and turned away. My friend behind me, she asked, "What's wrong?" and walked with me, and we just started walking toward her house. Turning to her, I explained how that was not the man who sells the ice cream, and the man who usually does isn't on vacation. He would have told my family. This guy seemed like a creep, and my gut told me he was dangerous, and I've always trusted my gut instinct. We just kept walking, talking about various things to really just pass the time. Soon I hear the song of the ice cream truck approaching us from down the road. I didn't have any issue walking a bit faster in the scorching heat. Soon the song stopped, but I could still hear the engine. Then it slowly got louder. Out of the corner of my eye, the man passed us slowly and looked at us. I glanced over at him, and he takes off, turning left at the four-way. My friend and I are now a bit spooked and turn right, walking down a road. On our left is a park. Most people call it Wharf 5 for some reason. We see one of our friends and wave. She's smiling and walks over. We chat for a bit, mostly to take a break and calm down. She turned toward me and said, "Did you see the ice cream man? He looked like a creep and he wouldn't stop staring at me." We said she could walk with us since her house was on the way. We chatted, had a few laughs, trying to forget about the weird guy. Then we hear it, the song again, approaching us, and then we see the clunky truck. It was coming down a private road that split off of the one we were walking, and it was coming right towards us. We just keep walking and ignore him, thinking he was just doing his job. He stopped when he saw us and turned left, still looking at us when he took down the opposite way down the road. We soon reach our friend's house and she bids us farewell and tells us to hurry up and get our asses home. We agreed and kept walking as she walked into the safety of her own home. It was soon becoming night and we had a 30-minute walk ahead of us. We kept talking, trying to calm the mood once again, but about 20 minutes later, we hear it, the ice cream truck music. It was playing, then stopped. The engine was roaring. We knew he must have been speeding. We started running as fast as we could and reached her house in a matter of minutes. We tried to open the door, but it was locked. A note on it saying, "Gone to the store, be back soon, spare key in the garage." She tore the note off and we ran out back, escaping the lights of the slowly passing ice cream truck. It stopped right outside of her house. The big white door swung open and the man stepped out. He walked up to the door and knocks on it. When no one answers, he jiggles the doorknob. He grunts frustratedly and he kicks the door, going around back. Quickly we hid, hiding under the porch. He walks up the stairs and bangs on the door, yelling, "Open up, I know you're in there, little girls." We just stay quiet, and I looked through the cracks of the board, seeing he was holding a shotgun. And, believe me or not, this guy aimed it at the door and shot the lock. He opened the door and walked inside. We bolted down the street toward our friend's house. We hear the man screaming, and again we hear the shotgun go off. I hope to God that he wasn't aiming at us, and if he was, he must have missed. My heart was beating faster than it ever had before, and we just ran. Once we got there, we ran in. The girl's parents looked at us, and we explained through quick breaths, clearly panicked. Her mom called the police and locked the doors. We saw the cops pass the house, once stopping at it to make sure we were okay. About an hour later, they came back. They said they found a shotgun, but no trace of the man or his truck. My friend's mom soon came home and apologized for leaving the house. We went over and were still on edge. We stayed up all night, a variety of kitchen knives by our side. This happened last year, and now I'm 16. The man whose ice cream truck was stolen never got it back, and this creepy guy had never been found. I hope he never comes back, because who knows what will happen if he does. I, for one, can only imagine. This story took place about 6 or 7 years ago. I am now a 20-year-old female from a smallish town in Austria, close to Vienna. I find myself thinking back to this experience whenever I'm around dolls, especially those mechanic ones which start singing a tune by pressing a button on them. Anyways, at the time of this story, me and my family lived in an apartment complex consisting of about 20 flats. My best friend at the time also happened to live in the same building, so we hung out all the time. We were practically part of each other's families. Her name for this story will be Anna, as her real name is rather unique. One night, we were planning on having a sleepover at her place, like many times before. Being young and stupid, we were really into paranormal stuff at the time. This interest was fueled even more by Anna's older friend, who just so happened to have been part of quite a few seances and wouldn't stop telling us stories about it. Not a day passed by on which ghosts, demons, and the like weren't part of our daily topics. This one particular night, when we wanted to have a sleepover, we were fooling around as usual. At the time, we were just hanging out in Anna's parents' bedroom, laying in bed and talking. Of course, the paranormal stuff came up again as well, but even talking about that, we weren't taking it seriously. Anna then remembered that her friend, the same one as with the seances, had printed out a few witch spells from the internet and had given it to Anna earlier that day. We were having a really good laugh about those spells, reading them out loud. It was stupid, I know, but who would have thought that some random spells from a sloppily made webpage could have an actual effect? So Anna's parents used to have a small and pretty doll sitting on the nightstand beside the bed. Nothing else was on the nightstand. It had blonde, curly hair, blue eyes, and was wearing a pink, frilly dress. When you pressed its stomach, it would start singing a rather pleasant song. It was adorable. We just finished reading out another spell when the doll suddenly started to sing its little song. At first it was the usual cheery tune, but that changed fast. It went from being cute and happy sounding to a completely distorted version of the song, and it wouldn't stop making sounds. Take any children's song and put it in a horror movie involving a haunting. That was kind of like what it sounded. Of course, Anna and I were completely shocked. We couldn't move, much less speak, for what felt like ages. Then Anna looked at me and shouted at me to get out of the room. She started running for the door. More out of reflex and fear. Afraid that I'd be left behind, I just followed her. We didn't go tell her parents like we probably should have, but instead, we just sat down in a different room and tried to calm down. Anna told me that she saw a shadow on the wall right across from where the nightstand with the doll sat, and that was what made her want to run out of the room. We ended up canceling the sleepover. All I really wanted to do was go home. Anna still swears up and down that she really saw that shadow that day. We also went back into her parents' bedroom the next day to check the doll. We thought that maybe the singing mechanism simply started to malfunction at the worst possible time. But when we tried pressing the button, the song started playing without sounding weird. No distortion whatsoever. I hope it was all a very creepy coincidence, but it still makes me reconsider my beliefs. Before, the paranormal was simply a fun topic to talk about. Now I'm convinced that there is more to this world than we can ever hope to perceive. Don't ever be as stupid as Anna and I were back then. Don't just play around with spells and the like, not taking these kinds of things seriously. Avoid it and play it safe. You never know what might come of it. I've known my best friend for years, and throughout all these years you can only imagine how many times I would have stayed over at his house overnight. Be it because my parents were out, he needed help studying, or we just wanted to mess around. The reasons are truly endless. So let's just call him Jack. Now, Jack and his family had gained ownership of their house whenever his grandmother had died, a few years prior. And it's a fairly large house, or rather what you'd consider large for a one-story house. It had its share of extra rooms and extra living areas, as any other house normally would. Once you open the front door, you'd be introduced to a long hallway no more than 20 to 25 feet long, with doorways on either sides of the walls leading to other rooms. At the end of the hallway to the left is what we call the den, a decently sized living room that's also attached to a dining area and kitchen. And to the right of that is a door that leads to a guest room that is now used as a storage room. Okay, now that we have the layout out of the way, let me tell you about some of the experiences that my friend and I have experienced. Throughout his years of living there, Jack has told me some of the unexplained things he's witnessed, as well as experienced since moving into that house, such as seeing apparitions, the feeling of being watched while trying to sleep, and unexplainable noises. Now, I've always been a fan of the paranormal and strange creatures alike, so every time I heard one of his stories, I just kept thinking about how much I want to go back to his house. I remember once when we were all at his mom's bookkeeping business that was just across the street. I had told his mom that I had to use the bathroom, to which she replied by giving me the keys to her house. I'm not going to lie, I was a pretty paranoid kid and was easily creeped out. So when she told me to go to their house alone, I wasn't very thrilled. From what I can remember, I was doing my business at their house alone, when suddenly the fan in the bathroom started. At that point, I quickly finished and ran the hell out of there. Since that point on, I never fully liked the house as much. So a few years later, back in 2014, I went to his house a lot, mostly hoping to catch some more activity. And from that year up until late 2015, I had had my fill of the paranormal enough to make me question back to that house. So let's begin at around mid-2014. Jack and I were 12, so obviously we were into doing some dumb stuff and things we knew we weren't supposed to do. We would mostly stay up late, that is if we got any sleep at all, after his mom had initially told us to go to bed. We usually liked to sleep in the den due to the fact that the recliners they had were much more comfy than any of the beds they had in the house. The routine almost always went as normal. Jack would fall asleep and I'd be up restless for the rest of the night, until I had decided to pass out. The recliners were pressed up against the wall, giving you a view of the rest of the den and the dining area. And when that's completely shrouded in darkness, you can see why it'd be so easy to get creeped out, especially when the kitchen leads off into another room that they had used as another storage room, and it was mostly filled with creepy old dolls. In one instance, I remember laying there, thinking to myself about something that I can't recall at the moment, and I was trying to fall asleep. I was only a few feet away from Jack, and Jack was asleep already. I started to feel a slight breeze and a gust of cold air. I just pulled the blankets over me, assuming it was a draft. That was until I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, and I heard a slight whisper that sounded like it was right in my ear. I didn't get much sleep that night. I had experienced many situations like that after that. I started to get used to it, but one thing that definitely scared my friend and I was the night that the door kept opening and closing. This was around early 2015. Jack and I were just playing Halo 4 when we decided to go to the kitchen and grab some sodas. On the way out, we had shut the door, but when we came back later, the door was wide open. We thought nothing of it at the time and proceeded inside, where we continued to play on his Xbox 360 for the next couple of hours. Soon, though, we had decided that it had been a long day and that it was time to hit the hay. Turned off the games and went straight to bed. He had a fairly large bed, so we both slept at each end. About 30 minutes go by, and Jack was already asleep as usual. I was about to doze off when I heard a faint creaking noise and looked up to see that his door had been wide open, like it previously had been. Considering how much I hated being able to see into his hallway that acted as a black abyss in the overall darkness of the house, I decided to go and shut the door. About what seemed like 10 minutes after, I heard the door open again. At this point, I was terrified. I didn't dare go back near that door. For the rest of the night, all I could hear was that damn thing creaking back and forth. Unsurprisingly, I called my mom to pick me up early the next morning. I wasn't taking any more chances, If there's one thing I've learned from my experiences like that, it's that even if you're curious, don't go and try to mess with the paranormal. It will leave you with nightmares for years. I've realized this, and hopefully you do too. This happened at a sleepover camp I was at a couple of months ago. I had a few friends with me at the time. Let's call them Christian, Frank, and Dave. We did the extreme version of camp. Basically, we slept in the woods in hammocks, tied to little posts in the hut we were sleeping in. It was the third night at the camp and I was about to fall asleep when suddenly a bright light glared into the hut. Since the hut didn't have high walls, I could see it perfectly. I thought maybe one of us had gone outside to use the bathroom, but the thing was the light was shining in our cabin for 20 minutes straight. I checked and everybody else was asleep. I was the only one who noticed it. I went to bed somehow and asked Dave about it in the morning. He told me what I thought. They were sleeping and he hadn't seen any of it. The next night was worse. I saw the light again and I shrugged it off. However, this time it turned itself off. Then I heard walking up the stairs since the cabin was elevated. But inside it wasn't a clacking sound you might hear on wooden steps. It sounded like heavy pounds of cloth smashing against the floor. I quickly hopped out of the hammock after so quietly and locked the door. When morning arrived, I couldn't have been happier. I didn't tell anyone of what happened the night before, but it doesn't end there. Something happened the fifth and final night at the camp. I fell asleep unusually quick. I woke up to that same cloth sound. However, it couldn't have been more than 20 feet away from where we were sleeping. I sat up and saw it. This creature was 7 feet tall. It looked like a feline, but on 2 legs. It walked around the hut, just looking at the other campers, when it suddenly and viciously turned its head towards me and spoke in a weird, distorted context. Then its head twitched like crazy, but only for a few seconds. I laid back down quickly and closed my eyes. I heard it walk away and out of the cabin. I don't know what the hell that was, and it was by far the most bizarre experience I ever could have imagined. But I hope I never see that thing again. This happened a number of years ago when I was around the age of 12 or 13, so my memory isn't the best. My friend was turning 13 and invited the rest of us to his house for a sleepover party. The host's name was Jesse, along with the rest of us, Garrett, Travis, and I. We all got there around 6:30 and ordered a pizza and played some video games. Later that night, around 11, when the rest of Jesse's family was asleep, we heard what sounded like someone walking around and dragging something around his living room. We thought nothing of it at first, until the footsteps became more of a stomping sound. A bit freaked out, Jesse and Garrett go up the stairs to check it out, thinking it could be Jesse's younger brother just being a pain in the ass. They then came back down and said that no one was there. So the 4 of us started a movie, only to have the stomping return a few minutes after the movie started. This time Travis and I headed upstairs quietly to catch whoever it was in the act. When we poked our heads out into the living room, we saw the shadow of someone dart into his kitchen. Travis ran after them, only to return 30 seconds later and tell me that no one was there, and that the door and the window in the kitchen were both closed and locked still. As we headed back downstairs, we happened to look down the hall to where the rest of everyone's bedrooms were, only to see the same silhouette of a man. As soon as we saw it, it ran towards us. We tripped over each other going down the stairs to escape whoever it was. We told Jesse and Garrett what had happened, and they believed us. At one point, we all fell asleep, and when we woke up the next morning being called for breakfast, we were then bombarded with question after question about why we were being so loud last night. We told them what had happened. Of course, they didn't believe us. Since that night, every time I was there to hang out, it felt like something was watching me from my peripheral vision or from behind me. We're all in our 20s now and haven't spoken of this event ever since. The story that I'm going to tell you has happened to me a few years ago, but it still haunts me to this day. It was on a Saturday night. Me and some friends were having a sleepover, a normal girl thing to do. The night was still young, so me and my friends were playing some games, like hide and seek in the dark, apples to apples, Uno, etc. Our games went on for hours and we didn't get tired of them, so we played the games over and over and over again, up until 10:30 at night when my mom said that she was going to go somewhere. She said she'd come right back, so we stopped our games and just started watching some TV. It was about 5 minutes later when things started getting really weird. One of my friends, well, let's call her Katie, she started passing out for no reason. She would pass out for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. Every time she would come to, she would start twitching and would pass out again. This went on for about an hour, then she stopped passing out all of a sudden. This is when I finally noticed my mom's stereo had turned on by itself and was playing a Pink album very loudly. I went to my mom's room and stood in the doorway, but then I heard whispering of a man talking gibberish. Suddenly, the door slammed in my face. I screamed and ran to my friends. I had to make sure that Katie and the others were safe. Thankfully, they were fine, but they saw what had happened and were scared to death as well. Maybe 5 long minutes later, me and my friends gathered the courage to go back to my mom's room. I slammed the door open and I turned on the light as quickly as possible. Then I ran over to the stereo and turned it off and ran back to the doorway. But what happened next horrified me and my friends forever. My mom's closet door flew open, and jackets flew out of the closet. Then the most blood-curdling voice yelled at us, "Get out!" My friends and I kicked it into high gear and ran out of the house, where we waited for an hour for my mom to get back. We told her everything that had happened, and she was shocked, but after a few hours we kind of calmed down, and then we went back inside. Out of curiosity, stupid curiosity, we all decided to go to the huge mirror in my house and take a picture. Later, when the picture was developed, we were scared to death of what was in the picture with us. A tall, slim, dark man stood behind us with the scariest smile I've ever seen. Thankfully, we don't live in that house anymore, but once in a while, I can feel that tall black man behind me, and he's still smiling, that blood-curdling smile. I am a female, and I was about 12 years old when this happened. I lived in a small city in Washington. It was during summer break, so I asked my grandma if I could go to one of my best friend's house and have a sleepover. Let's call her Rose. Once we got together at her place, one of our school friends, I don't remember his name, invited us to play a new game he got. He lived 2 houses down from Rose's, so her parents said that it would be fine. We got to his house around 6:30, and I'll tell you now, whatever game he bought really wasn't very interesting. So I was just looking out of his bedroom window. By that time, it was pitch dark, and at first, I could just see our reflections through the window and the glint from the TV's light. Outside his window was the backyard. There was a trampoline and children's toys scattered throughout. I was sitting right next to the window. The way I was angled, I could actually look up and see into the branches of the tree. So I looked up at it, and I saw 2 red eyes staring back at me. My eyes widened in terror as I tried to make out the body shape, but it was too dark. All I could really see were those red eyes. My throat tightened, and I started to shake. I turned around toward the TV and whispered to my friends, "Guys, look up into the tree. Do you see what I see?" Rose looked at me and then glanced at the tree. She froze, turning whiter than a ghost. Our friend also looked up into the tree, but he ran out of the room. We both ran after him because we were sure as hell not going to stay alone. He went and found his dad, who was sitting, watching TV in the living room. At first you could tell he didn't believe us, but he eventually got up and looked out the window where he saw the eyes as well. They were still there, just staring into our souls. Our friend's dad then rushed and grabbed his shotgun and told us kids to stay in the house. He went out the back door and shut it tightly behind him. It wasn't too long after when we heard the 2 gunshots and our friend's dad yelling at whatever was in the backyard. He came running back into the house, almost breaking the door down in his rush. He then pulled us all into the master bedroom, which was the only door that could lock, other than the main door and the back door. He was going on and on about how he had no idea what that thing was. That night I asked both of my friends if they were just playing a sick joke on me, but they both looked as terrified as I felt, and they said no. I believed them. To this day it scares me knowing there are things in this world that we can't explain. Those red eyes haunt me when I'm awake and when I'm asleep. I had hoped that it was just some animal looking in at us, but when my friend's dad shot those gunshots and ran back inside, It makes me wonder what kind of creature that was. What kind of creature would make his father so afraid? Be careful out there in the world, guys. A couple of years ago, my friend and I were in the upstairs part of my garage for a sleepover. As we both agreed to go to sleep, we heard the distant sound of music from the house up the street. I told him, "Don't worry about it. It will probably go away soon." He said, "Well, I hope it goes away soon because I'm super tired." We both tried to ignore it. I lay back down on my pillow and tried to go to sleep. A few minutes later, the sound started coming closer. I sat up and looked at John. "Do you hear that? It sounds like it's getting closer to us." He responded, "Yeah, it does, doesn't it?" I lay back down thinking about how the noises could possibly be coming closer, but I brushed it off. Soon enough, music and loud voices that seemed to be having a conversation blasted right outside the door that was down the stairs from the room we were sleeping. We immediately jumped up from the bed and looked towards the stairwell. We scanned the stairs and couldn't see anything, so I went downstairs and looked out the window. The window was at the bottom where there was a door that led to the outside. Still, I couldn't see anything, so I went back up to bed and just sat there, thinking about what could have caused this weird noise and why it could possibly be coming closer. Out of all the years I've lived in my house, I've never experienced anything like this. I don't have many neighbors, as I live in the mountains of California, and most of the homes nobody lives in full-time since a lot of houses up here are vacation homes. It stayed quiet for a while longer after that, when all of a sudden a blast of laughter and voices came out from outside the door. Me and John both grabbed the knives that were kept in a box by the bed. We charged downstairs screaming at the top of our lungs. But when we came to the bottom, there was nothing there, absolutely nothing, and it was silent. I haven't been that scared since.